If you ever find yourself drifting off to sleep, let your mind travel for a moment. Far from the noise of cities, beyond the line where sea and sky melt together, to a place so forbidden, so dangerous, that even the bravest men whisper its name with caution.
Ilha da Queimada Grande, Snake Island.
It lies just off the coast of Brazil, cloaked in mist and legend, wrapped in a silence that feels alive. At first glance, it could be paradise. Emerald trees rising from the ocean, soft waves kissing the rocks, the air heavy with salt and sun. But beneath that beauty, there's something else. Something that moves in the leaves, slides between the roots, and waits. You would not survive here even one day. The moment your foot touches the wet sand, the island seems to breathe around you, as if it senses your presence. The smell is thick, a mix of seaweed, decay, and something metallic, almost like blood. The air hums faintly with life, but not the kind that welcomes you. They say that on this small patch of land, roughly 45 acres wide, live between 2,000 and 4,000 snakes. Not ordinary snakes, but one of the most venomous on earth, the golden lancehead. Their scales glisten like polished bronze, their eyes dark and unblinking, and their bite, it's said, can melt human flesh in minutes. No one really knows how many there are because no one stays long enough to count. The Brazilian Navy forbids anyone from stepping foot here without permission. Only scientists, a handful of them, visit once a year, and even they move cautiously, boots sealed, hands gloved, hearts beating fast under the weight of the silence. Yet once there was someone who lived here, and that's where the story begins. Long before the warnings and the laws, there was a lighthouse on Queimada Grande. Built in 1909 to guide passing ships, it stood tall and lonely above the forest, its beams slicing through fog that sometimes hid entire vessels from sight. A lighthouse keeper was stationed there with his wife and their small son. For years they tended the flame, trimmed the wick, polished the glass, and waited for supply boats from the mainland. But one night, the stories say it was a storm, the light went out. When the rescue crew arrived days later, they found the building empty. No sign of struggle, no footprints, only silence and the faint smell of rot. Inside, the bed was overturned, and near the door, a snake's skin, fresh, golden, and coiled like a question mark. Locals still whisper about what happened that night. Some say the snakes came through the windows, driven from the forest by heavy rain. Others believe the keeper went mad from isolation, opened the doors and let them in. There are darker tales too, that the island itself claimed them, jealous of its solitude, angry that humans dared to light a fire on its sacred soil. You can almost imagine it. The thunder rolling in from the sea, waves hammering the rocks, lightning flashing against the black trees. The family huddled inside, lanterns flickering, the sound of hissing growing closer, like whispers in the dark. And then nothing but the storm. When you close your eyes now, can you hear it? The hiss beneath the rain, the creak of the old lighthouse door, the heartbeat of fear. The island is still there, breathing in the dark, its snakes still ruling their kingdom of silence. Scientists say the golden lanceheads evolved in isolation, after rising sea levels cut Queimada Grande off from the mainland thousands of years ago. With no prey but birds, their venom became more potent, their strike faster, nature's way of perfecting death. Even now, seabirds that mistake the island for a resting place rarely take flight again. The snakes climb trees, their bodies blending with branches, and wait. When a bird lands, they strike from above, quick as the wind, silent as thought. Each bite, a story repeated for millennia. And yet, beneath that terror, there's something almost sacred about this place. Untouched by man, unspoiled by greed, a fragment of earth that remembers what it was before us. You might wonder how it feels to stand there. The ground soft and uneven beneath your boots, vines brushing your skin, the air humming with invisible movement. Every step would be a negotiation with fate. Even the leaves seemed to whisper warnings. Go back, they seemed to say. This place is not yours. The island's name, Queimada Grande, comes from the Portuguese word for burned. Once, long ago, settlers tried to clear it for farming. They set fire to the trees, hoping to tame the wild. But the forest grew back, thicker than before, and the snakes returned, as if from the ashes. Some believe they were sent by the gods to guard something buried there. A treasure, perhaps, or a secret older than memory. Others say it's just nature reclaiming what was hers. Still, legends have a way of holding truth, don't they? In the villages along the coast, fishermen tell stories of strange lights at night, flickers deep within the forest, where no man should be. Some claim they hear voices carried on the wind, calling their names from across the waves. It's the ghosts of the lighthouse, they say, or the island itself, trying to lure you closer. But no one answers. They know better. Even the birds avoid it now. Only the sea touches its shores, endlessly, patiently, as if waiting for the island to breathe again. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it. The rhythm of the waves against stone, the sigh of the trees, the soft hiss of something unseen beneath the leaves. And you realize this is a living thing, a pulse, an ancient heartbeat that never stopped. Maybe that's why people can't stay away. We're drawn to danger, to mystery, to the edge of the map where the world still keeps its secrets. There's a part of us that wants to look, even when we know we shouldn't. That's how every legend begins, with curiosity, and the soft sound of a wave breaking against a forbidden shore. One day, a group of biologists from Sao Paulo arrived on Queimada Grande, armed with gear, antidotes, and quiet determination. They came to study the snakes to understand how isolation shaped their evolution. The air was still that morning, thick with humidity, the sky a pale gray that felt close enough to touch. As their boat approached, one of them, a woman named Helena, felt her skin prickle. It's too quiet, she said. Where are the birds? No one answered. They all felt it. The absence of sound, the heavy stillness that seemed to press against their eardrums. When they stepped onto the island, their boots sank into the wet earth, and the scent of decay rose around them like a warning. They moved slowly, watching every step, scanning the ground for movement. For a while, nothing happened. Just the rustle of leaves, the steady hum of insects, the creak of branches above. But then Helena stopped. There, she whispered, near a fallen log, half buried in moss, something shimmered. A coil of gold, barely visible. The snake didn't move, not at first. Its body was warm with sunlight, its head resting lightly on the ground. But when her shadow passed over it, the creature lifted its head, tongue flicking once, twice, tasting the air. In that moment she felt it, the ancient intelligence, the awareness. The snake knew she was there. The team froze. No one breathed. And then, just as quietly as it had appeared, the snake slipped away, disappearing into the undergrowth like a thought fading in the dark. They're everywhere, Helena murmured. Everywhere. That night, as they set up camp near the old lighthouse ruins, the air grew colder. The wind shifted, bringing with it the smell of the sea and something else. Something dry, dusty, and alive. The light of their small fire flickered across the stones, revealing carvings half hidden by lichen. Shapes, circles, spirals, and something that looked almost like an eye. Helena traced it with her fingers. These aren't from the lighthouse, she said softly. They're older. Older than what? Someone asked. She looked up. Older than us. Outside, the forest stirred. Somewhere in the dark, a branch cracked. The sound was soft, almost gentle, but it carried a reminder that they were not alone. The hiss came next, low and drawn out, from the direction of the trees. One of the men reached for his flashlight, but Helena raised her hand. "Don't," she whispered. "They can sense vibration, light, heat." They sat in silence, hearts pounding, the fire snapping softly between them. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, a shadow moved at the edge of the clearing, slow, deliberate, curious. Another followed, and another. "They're watching us," Helena said. Her voice trembled. The man beside her swallowed hard. "Maybe," he said, "they remember." "Remember what?" Helena turned, but he didn't answer. The wind rose suddenly, carrying the faint sound of the sea, or was it whispering? And the fire guttered, sparks spiraling into the night. In the darkness beyond, something glowed faintly. A shimmer, golden and alive, like scales reflecting starlight. Helena stared, her pulse thundering in her ears. For a moment, she thought she saw shapes moving between the trees, too large to be snakes, too fluid to be human. She blinked and they were gone. Only the forest remained, silent and still, as if holding its breath. "We shouldn't have come here," she said finally. The wind died, the hiss faded, but the feeling did not. Somewhere, deep within the island, something ancient stirred, something that had been waiting a very long time. And by dawn, the mist began to thicken again, swallowing the lighthouse, the camp, and every trace of human presence. Yet the story does not end there, because by the time the rescue boat returned a week later, only one person was found, sitting on the rocks, silent, her eyes fixed on the forest. It was Helena. When they asked what had happened, she simply whispered one word: "Listening." The crew looked at each other, uneasy. Listening to what? She turned her head slowly, and in the faint morning light, her pupils looked strange, thin, elongated, almost reptilian. "To them," she said, "they're not just snakes." She smiled then, faint, distant, and looked back toward the trees. "They remember." And as the boat pulled away, a wave washed over the rocks, glinting gold under the rising sun. Somewhere behind the mist, something moved, a shimmer, a whisper, a breath. The island was awake again. But what it was remembering, that was a story yet to come. Under the heavy blanket of dawn, the ocean around Quemada Grande shimmered like liquid mercury, calm on the surface yet hiding unseen currents below. The rescue boat that carried Helena back to the mainland left behind a trail of foam that quickly vanished into the fog, as if the island refused to be remembered. For weeks afterward, Helena said little. Doctors in Sao Paulo examined her, finding nothing wrong except the strange vacancy in her eyes, a distant gleam that made people uneasy. They thought it was trauma, sunstroke, dehydration, or shock, but none of the explanations fit. She slept with the windows open, claiming she could still hear the hiss of the wind, the rustle of scales against leaves, even from across the sea. "They talk," she whispered once to a nurse who was changing her bandage, "but not with words." The nurse smiled nervously, thinking she was delirious, yet later that night, when the windows rattled and a thin shadow crossed the moonlight, she closed the shutters and didn't sleep again until morning. News of the incident spread quietly, because the Brazilian Navy preferred it that way. Quemada Grande was already infamous, and no one wanted panic or superstition to flare up again. Officially, the report said 1 casualty from an accident, 2 missing presumed dead, and the survivor suffering from exposure. But rumors have their own life. In the fishing towns along the coast, whispers began anew, of lights seen flickering beyond the horizon, a fog that glowed faintly gold at night, of seabirds falling from the sky as if struck by invisible hands. The locals began leaving offerings on the beach. Small bottles of cachaca, pieces of bread, even little carved snakes made from driftwood. "It's to keep the island asleep," they said, "so it doesn't remember us." Helena, meanwhile, disappeared from public view. She left the hospital quietly one evening, walking out through the garden barefoot, and no one noticed until morning. Her clothes were found near the docks, damp with seawater, but her trail ended there. Some claimed she boarded a fishing boat bound for the south coast. Others swore they saw her standing on a cliff, looking out toward the sea, her hair blowing like seaweed in the wind. The Navy sent patrols for weeks, scanning the coastline, but she was gone, and the island waited. The following year, another research team was assembled, this time under strict supervision with military escort and medical oversight. They were told to avoid contact with the interior forest and to collect only limited samples near the shoreline. The lead biologist, Dr. Marcos Viller, was a careful man. Steady, methodical, skeptical of myths. He had read Helena's reports, what little survived of them. Pages filled with sketches of snake patterns, notes about pheromonal communication, and, toward the end, strange symbols resembling the carvings on the lighthouse stones. "Hallucinations," he said to his team. "That's all." Yet when their boat reached the island, and the gray mist began to thin, something shifted. The smell hit first, salt and decay, but layered with something sweet, like fruit left too long in the sun. The trees on the shore seemed to glisten, not with dew, but with something thicker, amber-colored, dripping from branches as if the forest itself was bleeding. "It's resin," one of the assistants said, reaching for it. Marcos stopped him. "Don't touch." The tide was low, and for a moment the island looked still, almost peaceful. But peace here was a disguise. They landed near the ruins of the old lighthouse. The walls were cracked and overgrown, the metal door rusted shut. Marcos touched the cold stone, tracing the edges of a carving half buried under moss. A spiral, like the one Helena had drawn. His heart beat faster, though he didn't know why. "We'll start the survey at the perimeter," he said. "Stay within line of sight." For hours they worked in silence, collecting soil samples, measuring temperature, noting the absence of birds. Only the insects made sound, a rhythmic, ceaseless hum that seemed to pulse in time with their movements. Then, around midday, the wind changed. It came suddenly, sweeping through the trees, carrying the faintest sound of hissing. Not one voice, but many, layered and echoing, like the rustle of silk. Marcos looked up, and for a heartbeat, he thought he saw movement in the canopy. Long, golden shapes gliding through the branches. "Let's pack up," he said quietly. "Now." But one of the soldiers, a young man named Duarte, had wandered ahead toward a fallen tree. "Dr. Viller, over here," he called. He knelt, pointing at something pale against the dark soil. Marcos approached slowly, his boots sinking in the damp ground. It was a skull, human, small, the bone weathered but intact. Nearby lay a piece of metal, corroded but still recognizable, the frame of an old lantern. The lighthouse keeper, perhaps, or his son. The others gathered, whispering. The soldier reached for the skull, but before his fingers touched it, a low hiss cut through the air. Came from beneath the log. "Don't move," Marcos said sharply. Duarte froze. A moment later, a golden lancehead slid out from the shadows, its scales glinting like molten sunlight, eyes fixed on him. Marcos raised his hand slowly. "Step back very slowly." Duarte obeyed, but as he shifted his weight, his boot crushed a twig. The sound was tiny but enough. The snake struck. It was faster than thought, a flash of gold and pain. Duarte screamed once, clutching his leg. The others pulled him back, and Marcos grabbed the medical kit, injecting antivenom as the soldier's breathing quickened. Within minutes, his skin turned pale, his veins darkening beneath the surface. "We need to go," someone said. Marcos nodded, his voice tight. "Back to the boat." But when they turned, the path behind them seemed different. The trees had closed and somehow the light dimmer, the air thicker. "We came this way," one of them said, but the tracks in the soil were gone. "Stay calm," Marcos ordered, though his voice betrayed the tremor in his chest. They carried Duarte between them, moving fast, following the faint smell of salt that should have led them to shore. But the forest seemed to shift with each step, the sound of hissing growing louder, surrounding them. When they finally reached the beach, the tide had risen. The boat was gone. Marcos stood in the surf, staring at the empty horizon. "It's drifted," someone said. But there was no wind, no current strong enough. It was simply gone. The sun dipped low, turning the mist to gold. Behind them, the forest watched. By nightfall, Duarte was dead. They buried him near the lighthouse ruins, marking the spot with a wooden stake. Marcos didn't speak. He sat by the dying fire, the notebook in his hands trembling. Around them, the darkness moved. "There's something wrong with this place," whispered one of the assistants. "It's like it's alive." Marcos didn't answer. He could hear it too, the breathing. Not wind, not insects, but slow, deep inhalations that seemed to come from the ground itself. In the distance, faint lights flickered between the trees, just as the fisherman had described. They pulsed softly, rhythmically, almost like signals. When he closed his eyes, he saw the carvings again, spirals within spirals, patterns that seemed to turn inward forever. And somewhere, beneath the sound of the sea, a voice, a whisper, barely human. Listening, he opened his eyes. The fire had gone out. The others were asleep, their faces pale, their breaths shallow. Marcos rose quietly, walking toward the shore. The sand was cold beneath his boots, the sea glowing faintly under the moonlight. For a moment, he thought he saw movement in the water, something sleek, coiling just beneath the surface. He leaned closer. A reflection flickered, a golden eye staring back. The next morning, only two of them remained. The others had vanished, their tents undisturbed, footprints leading nowhere. The forest was silent again. Marcos and his assistant, Anna, prepared to leave, though their radio was dead, and the emergency flare refused to ignite. "We'll follow the coastline," he said. "We'll find another point to signal." They walked for hours, the waves whispering beside them. The air grew hotter, the sun heavy on their skin. At one point, Anna stumbled, catching herself on a rock slick with moss. Her hand came away red. "Blood?" she asked. But it wasn't blood. It was resin again, thick and golden, warm to the touch. She stared at it, mesmerized. "It's like it's alive." Marcos pulled her back. "Don't touch it." But when he looked at her, he saw her eyes had changed, her pupils thin, vertical. "Anna!" She blinked slowly. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. "They're calling." She turned toward the forest, and before he could stop her, she walked straight into the trees, disappearing into the green. "Anna!" he shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the mist. He ran after her, branches slapping his face, the smell of earth and rot filling his lungs. The hissing surrounded him now, louder, closer. He stumbled into a clearing and froze. In the center stood the old lighthouse, though he was sure they'd left it miles behind. Its beam flickered weakly, sweeping across the forest, and for a brief moment, he saw them, shapes coiling through the undergrowth, hundreds of them, glowing faintly gold. And there, at the top of the lighthouse stairs, stood Helena. Her skin was pale, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. "You came back," she said softly. Marcos tried to speak, but the words stuck. "What happened here?" "They woke up," she replied. "They remember everything we forgot." She reached out her hand, and he saw that her veins shimmered faintly beneath the skin, golden and fluid. "You can't fight them," she whispered. "You can only listen." The air vibrated then, the sound deep and resonant, like 1,000 voices speaking at once. Marcos fell to his knees, clutching his head, the world spinning. The ground beneath him pulsed, warm, alive. He felt something move under the soil, vast and ancient. "What are they?" he gasped. Helena smiled sadly. "Guardians." And then the light went out. When the Navy arrived weeks later, they found no one, no tents, no bodies, no tracks. Only the lighthouse stood, its door open, the stairs slick with golden resin. Inside, they found a notebook on the floor, its last page soaked with water, the words barely legible. "They are not snakes. They are the island." After that, Quemada Grande was sealed completely. Boats were ordered to keep 20 miles away, and any unauthorized entry was punishable by imprisonment. But at night, fishermen still see the glow in the mist. And sometimes, when the tide is right and the wind carries the scent of salt and something sweet, they swear they hear a voice, soft, whispering, almost human, listening. And in that moment, they turn their boats around because everyone knows you wouldn't survive a day there. Not now. Not ever. The ocean was calm that morning, too calm for the time of year, and the sky above the coast of Itanum hung low and colorless like damp linen. The fishermen said it was a bad omen. When the sea stops breathing, they said, something beneath it has begun to stir. 3 months had passed since the last expedition vanished near Quemada Grande, and still the Navy refused to release details. Officially, the island remained restricted, its perimeter patrolled by drones and occasional helicopter sweeps. But even from 20 miles out, sailors swore they could see a faint gold shimmer rising from the mist, as if the island itself glowed from within. In Sao Paulo, deep beneath the Ministry of Environment building, a small briefing was taking place in a windowless room. The walls were lined with soundproof padding, and a single lamp flickered over the long metal table. Around it sat 4 people: Colonel Alves from the Navy, Dr. Lucia Ferreira, a biochemist specializing in venomous fauna, journalist Rafael Torres, who had been granted limited access to report on scientific recovery operations, and a quiet man in a dark suit who never gave his name. Alves spoke first, his voice low and clipped. "We lost 2 full teams.
Seventine personnel.
We recovered no remains, but we found recordings." He slid a small device across the table. It was a weathered field recorder, covered in salt residue. This was transmitted 3 days after radio contact was lost. Lucia pressed play. At first there was static, then faint breathing, wind, and something else, a rhythmic sound like waves crashing, but too slow, too deliberate. Then a voice trembling. "This place isn't an island," it whispered. "It's a body, and it's awake." The room fell silent. Alves turned it off. "We believe this was Dr. Viller." Raphael leaned forward. "You think he's still alive?" "We think," Alves said carefully, "that something used his voice." The man in the dark suit cleared his throat. "We've authorized a controlled extraction. Satellite scans indicate structural anomalies under the island, cavities or tunnels, possibly biological in nature. We want samples."
No heroics.
Lucia frowned. "You're sending people back?" "Not people," the man said. "Machines." The following week, A research vessel called the Artemis IV departed from Santos Harbor, carrying a cargo of submersible drones, thermal scanners, and one AI-operated rover codenamed Orion. Lucia oversaw the mission remotely, her hands trembling slightly as she calibrated the signal. She had studied the golden lancehead's venom for years, its potency unmatched, but what haunted her now wasn't biology. It was the implication that something larger connected all of it. The first transmission came in just before dawn. The drones had reached the island's southern cliff. Cameras flickered to life, showing jagged rock slick with condensation. The forest loomed in the distance, dense and dark, the leaves glistening faintly as though coated in oil. Temperature variance: 12 degrees above baseline, the tech reported.
No visible fauna.
Orion advanced, its treads crunching over stones. The drone's sensors mapped the terrain in infrared, revealing heat signatures beneath the soil, long, sinuous shapes, hundreds of them, all motionless but alive. Lucia leaned closer to the screen. "They're dormant," she whispered. The drone entered the ruins of the lighthouse. Inside, the walls shimmered faintly with resin, pulsing in slow rhythm. "That's impossible," one of the engineers muttered. "Organic bioluminescence at this intensity doesn't exist." Orion's arm extended, collecting a small sample. The resin clung to the probe like honey, stretching in translucent threads. "Chemical analysis?" Lucia asked. The monitor displayed a string of readings: proteins, enzymes, something unfamiliar. "It's not resin," she said softly. "It's venom." Suddenly the camera feed flickered. A burst of static filled the speakers, then a faint whisper, almost like breathing through a pipe. "Listening." The team froze. "Cut audio," Alves ordered. But the sound continued even after the feed went dark. Came through the speakers like a heartbeat, deep and steady. Then, from the signal interference, a shape began to emerge, waves of distortion forming outlines, a figure standing within the lighthouse, pale and still. It was Helena. Her eyes glowed faintly, golden light spilling down her cheeks like tears. "You shouldn't have come back," her voice said, layered with echoes. "It remembers you." Orion systems went into shutdown, its camera melting into static. When the image returned, the drone was lying on its side, half submerged in golden fluid. The transmission ended. Silence filled the control room. "What was that?" Raphael whispered. "Projection? Heat anomaly?" Lucia shook her head. "It responded to us." Alves turned to the man in the dark suit. "We abort." The man didn't answer right away. He stared at the blank screen, his reflection flickering faintly in the glass. "No," he said finally. "We continue." That night, the ship anchored 20 miles offshore. The crew tried to rest, but sleep came uneasy. Some said they heard faint tapping on the hull, as if something brushed against the metal from below. Others dreamed of gold light seeping through the floor. Just before dawn, alarms blared. "We've got movement," the operator shouted. The sonar showed a massive object rising from beneath the seabed, directly beneath the island. "It's huge," someone muttered. "Like a mountain, no bigger." The water began to churn, waves slamming against the vessel. The surface shimmered with strange phosphorescence, and from within the glow, something vast uncoiled. It wasn't a creature in the normal sense. Its form shifted, serpentine yet fluid, as if made of light and flesh at once. The island trembled. On the monitors, the forest moved like a living thing, trees bending and twisting, the ground pulsing as though breathing. "It's alive," Lucia whispered. "The entire island. It's part of it." The signal cut to black. In Sao Paulo, communication with Artemis IV ceased entirely. The Navy dispatched a rescue plane, but when it arrived, there was nothing. No debris, no oil slick, no signal. Only the same still ocean, calm and gray. A week later, fishermen found fragments of equipment washed ashore. A broken transmitter, a boot, a torn scrap of metal marked Orion. But no bodies. That should have been the end. Yet months later, reports began to surface along the coast. Fishermen found dead sea snakes floating in clusters, their bodies twisted, scales shimmering faintly gold even after death. Others spoke of voices carried by the tide, whispering in Portuguese words that no one could remember upon waking. One night, a storm rolled in from the south, black and heavy. A cargo vessel passing near the exclusion zone reported seeing lights beneath the water, hundreds of them, spiraling upward in formation like a living constellation. Their radio log captured faint static and a voice, female, calm, distant. It's listening now, and it's learning. After that, the signal vanished. Governments denied it, but leaked documents told another story. Satellite imagery showed the island had grown. Its coastline extended by almost 30 meters, new land forming where there had been only open sea. Scientists argued it was volcanic activity, but no seismic data supported it. The golden glow beneath the surface intensified, visible even from orbit. Lucia, who had resigned after the Artemis disaster, was found dead in her apartment 6 months later. On her wall, written in resin-like streaks, were the words, "They're not waiting anymore." Raphael disappeared soon after publishing a forbidden article claiming the snakes were not a species, but cells of something larger, neurons in an organism that spans the entire island. His apartment was left unlocked, his laptop still open, playing a single looped audio clip, the same whisper from the first recording. Listening. In the years that followed, coastal activity dwindled. Fishing routes shifted south. The Navy installed permanent surveillance buoys, though one by one, they began failing, the last transmission from the outermost buoy showing a faint golden shimmer before the feed went dark. Then came the tidal event. On a cloudless night, the ocean near Queimada Grande receded nearly half a mile, exposing the sea floor, slick, black, covered in twisting channels that looked eerily organic. From above, it resembled an enormous spiral, pulsing faintly, as if drawing breath. The next morning, the island was gone. In its place, a smooth expanse of golden rock gleamed under the sun, steaming faintly, as though newly born. Satellite data recorded low-frequency vibrations spreading outward for hours afterward, reaching as far as the Antarctic shelf. A frequency analysis revealed the pattern was not random. It matched the rhythm of human neural activity, as if something vast had begun to think. To this day, no one approaches the coordinates. The Navy claims the site is under ecological quarantine, but satellite photos show changes every few weeks. New ridges, new cracks, shapes resembling veins spreading across the ocean floor. And sometimes, when the light hits the water just right, you can see something beneath the surface, coiled and waiting, golden eyes staring upward through miles of depth. They say the island was cursed, haunted by venom and legend. But the truth is worse. It was never an island. It was a seed. And now, the sea is growing quiet again, like before the first awakening. The air tastes of salt and something sweet. Fishermen whisper prayers and leave their offerings on the shore, but the tide no longer carries them away. It leaves them untouched, as if the ocean is watching. Somewhere below, in the endless dark, the heart of the island beats once, slow, patient, remembering. And across the world, seismographs twitch, faint signals pulsing in time, like a whisper threading through the planet's crust, a single word echoing through static and stone. Listening. The storm that swallowed Queimada Grande had left behind not silence, but something far more unsettling. A hum beneath the ocean, a frequency so low that ships passing the coordinates felt their hulls tremble, as though the sea itself remembered. Weeks turned into months, and yet no official word came from the Brazilian Navy. No reports, no updates, just a void of information that made the world whisper. The coordinates were erased from modern maps, satellite images blurred into digital fog, and any vessel approaching was met with an automated warning. Restricted biological zone. Turn back immediately. But the sea doesn't forget, and neither do those who live by it. Fishermen from Itanum and Santos began to tell strange stories in the taverns near the docks. Of birds falling from the sky, of glowing foam washing ashore at night, and of serpentine shapes coiling just below the surface when the moon turned red. A marine biologist named Dr. Sofia Andrade heard these rumors and couldn't let them rest. She had studied Queimada Grande for years, fascinated by its isolation and by the golden lancehead vipers that ruled its cliffs. She remembered the day she first read a field note from 1921, a line scribbled by a lighthouse keeper before he vanished. "The snakes are not from here. They listen to the sea." Those words haunted her. Now, with the island gone and her colleagues dismissing the event as a natural collapse, she felt a pull stronger than reason. It was curiosity, but also guilt, because she had once advocated for the island to remain untouched, claiming it was a perfect ecosystem. What if that perfection was never natural? Late one night, in the lab's dim light, she replayed underwater recordings taken days before the island's disappearance. The usual symphony of currents and shrimp clicks was there, but beneath it, something moved. Pattern, a rhythm, like breathing, slow, massive, and deep. She adjusted the frequency and felt her chest vibrate, as though her body were a tuning fork. "It's not mechanical," she whispered, sweat forming on her palms. "It's alive." The next morning, she took a small vessel and headed into the exclusion zone. The air thickened as she approached. The compass spun aimlessly. Even the gulls avoided the sky above her. The waves changed color, from gray to a shade of gold, like liquid metal under the fading sun. When she leaned overboard, she saw a reflection that wasn't hers. Eyes like polished amber staring back, unblinking, ancient. Her breath caught, and she stumbled backward. The hum grew louder. For a moment she thought she heard whispering, not from the wind but from beneath the waves. Words formed, faint but clear. "We are not gone." The radio crackled. "Dr. Andrade, respond." It was her assistant, Lucas, panicked. "You're off course. You're heading straight into..." The transmission cut. The hum became a pulse. And then, from the depths, shapes began to rise. Slender, sinuous, covered in scales that shimmered like glass. Not one, dozens, hundreds, each movement perfect, synchronized, as if controlled by a single mind. She froze. They weren't swimming. They were climbing the water itself. The sea bulged upward, forming a mound of living motion, a shape trying to take form. The air smelled of ozone and rot, and her throat burned with salt. Sophia's rational mind screamed to record everything, to capture the impossible, but her body was trembling too violently. She reached for her camera, but as her fingers brushed the power button, the hum shifted, becoming words, in her own voice. "Do not look." She dropped it. The sea convulsed, and a column of water shot into the air, drenching the deck. Within the mist, she saw something enormous moving, a silhouette that made her heart stop. It wasn't an island. It was the island, alive, rising, wrapped in serpents like veins of gold. The rocks pulsed, and beneath the surface, she glimpsed what looked like an immense heart beating slowly, rhythmically. each thud echoing through her bones. The world tilted. The next thing she knew, she was lying on a beach miles away, her boat shattered on the rocks. Her clothes were soaked in something thick, not just seawater, but a golden film that shimmered faintly, almost alive. She coughed, and for a moment, something small and bright slipped from her mouth, wriggled, and vanished into the sand. For weeks, Sophia said nothing. She stayed in a small village, hiding from journalists and government men who came asking questions. But at night, she couldn't sleep. The hum was still inside her, faint but constant. When she closed her eyes, she saw flickers, scales, eyes, waves turning to flesh, and she began to notice small things. The fishermen who helped her ashore, they now complained of strange rashes, of seeing things moving in the rainwater barrels. Birds began avoiding the coast entirely. The mangroves grew twisted, their roots glistening gold. The infection was spreading. One evening, she sat by the shore and whispered into a recorder. The island didn't vanish. It shed its skin. Her voice trembled. And the sea is wearing it now. Days later, Lucas found that recording washed up near the pier, sealed in a glass bottle. He played it once, then twice, unable to stop. At night, he too began hearing the hum. Soon, researchers from Japan, Norway, and Chile detected similar frequencies in their coastal waters. Fish migration patterns changed. Deep-sea cameras captured flashes of movement that defied taxonomy. Governments denied everything, but the fishermen knew. They said the sea was listening. And when the storms came, the rain carried something glimmering, tiny golden flecks that melted into the soil, into rivers, into blood. The legend of Snake Island had transformed from a place to a presence, a consciousness spreading quietly through salt and time. And far below, in the abyss where light never reaches, something vast turned its gaze upward again, patient and aware. The hum deepened, echoing through the water like a heartbeat shared by the ocean itself. Humanity had always feared the island, but now the island was everywhere. In the months that followed, the world began to notice subtle changes, the kind that crept in like whispers and grew into dread before anyone dared to name them. Coastal towns from Brazil to Morocco reported an unnatural stillness in the mornings, a silence where the gulls once screamed. Fishermen brought back nets heavy with fish whose scales shimmered faintly gold, their eyes wide and glassy as if reflecting something they had seen too deep. Scientists tried to rationalize it: mutation, pollution, solar radiation, but none of their theories explained the hum. It wasn't heard so much as felt, a resonance beneath the bones, a vibration that seemed to come from within. People near the shore began to dream of the same thing. An island that rose and fell like a living creature, and voices that spoke from the sea in languages older than memory. Dr. Sophia Andrade, hidden now deep inland under a false name, could feel the hum even here, hundreds of miles from the coast. It pulsed behind her ribs like a second heartbeat. She no longer needed recordings or instruments. She could sense when the tide turned, when the moon called to whatever lived beneath. Her hair had begun to lose its color, strands of gold spreading from the roots, glowing faintly under candlelight. She wrote everything down, page after trembling page, but the words seemed to shift when she looked away. "It's learning through us," she wrote one night. "We were its experiment all along." She dreamed often of Queimada Grande, not as it was, but as it had become. In her dreams, the trees bled golden sap, the snakes sang without mouths, and the air shimmered like the surface of a mirage. Sometimes she saw herself standing on the island's peak, surrounded by those same serpents, their scales reflecting her face back at her, multiplied 1,000 times. She would wake gasping, the sheets damp, her veins faintly luminescent in the dark. Across the world, similar phenomena appeared. A diver in the Mediterranean vanished after describing a forest of moving light beneath a trench. A cargo ship off the coast of Ghana reported the sea turning viscous, thick as honey, before radio contact ceased. In Japan, an entire harbor turned golden overnight, the water perfectly still, like a mirror reflecting nothing but sky. The next morning, the fish were gone, and the air smelled faintly of iron and orchids. Governments issued warnings, classified files, and dispatched research vessels under new names, but few returned. Those who did spoke of hearing their own thoughts echoed back through the sonar, altered, as if another intelligence were listening and replying. The hum had become global. It was faint inland, but along the shores, it vibrated through walls, through metal, through skin. Pregnant women near the coast reported strange sensations, their unborn children reacting violently during high tide, their hearts beating in perfect rhythm with the sea. One journalist, desperate to uncover the truth, tracked down Dr. Andrade in her hideout near the mountains. He found her house empty, filled with papers and sketches pinned to every surface. Circles, waveforms, serpentine shapes intertwined with maps of ocean currents. The only trace of her was a recording device left running on the table. When he pressed play, her voice filled the room, soft but trembling. It's no longer contained by water. The hum travels through us. Every sound we make feeds it. Every breath carries it further. We are becoming part of its memory. Then silence. The journalist published her notes, but within days the site vanished, scrubbed from the web. His colleagues said he left for the coast soon after and never came back. That was when people began to notice the gold dust in the rain. It was barely visible, just a shimmer when sunlight struck the puddles, but it left stains that wouldn't wash away. Skin contact caused a tingling warmth, not unpleasant at first, but within weeks, those exposed reported vivid dreams, shared dreams, of a rising sea and whispering voices calling them by name. Cults began to form along the coasts. They called themselves Os Filhos de Ilha, the children of the island. They spoke of communion, of evolution through surrender. Their rituals were performed in silence, always near water, always under the new moon. Authorities tried to disperse them, but reports of disappearances grew. Whole villages abandoned their homes and walked into the sea at dusk, leaving behind trails of footprints that glowed faintly before fading. Satellite scans revealed strange growth patterns along the ocean floor, networks of luminous threads stretching between continents like veins of light. Some scientists speculated about bioluminescent algae or microbe colonies, but others whispered of something intelligent weaving those patterns, something that remembered the shape of the island and was rebuilding it piece by piece, not above the sea this time, but beneath it, vast and unseen. The oceans began to warm, not gradually but in pulses, synchronized with the hum. Coral reefs died, then returned, altered, shimmering gold instead of red, spreading faster than any known species. Fish no longer fled from predators. They swam in perfect harmony, thousands moving as one. And always that sound beneath the surface, steady, patient, alive. One night, far inland, Sophia's former assistant Lucas woke to find the walls of his apartment breathing. The air shimmered faintly. His reflection in the window blinked out of sync. The hum filled his skull. He pressed his palms to his ears, but the sound was inside him, a whisper now, speaking words that weren't words. He looked down and saw thin golden veins crawling beneath his skin, pulsing softly. He tried to scream, but his mouth filled with warmth, thick and metallic. The next morning, his apartment was empty, the windows open, the floor wet with salt water. People said it was madness, but by then, the hum had reached everywhere, the desert, the forests, even the mountains. It didn't need the ocean anymore. The frequency had found its hosts, and across the planet, the rain shimmered faintly gold, the rivers glowed at night, and the tides rose higher than ever recorded. Somewhere beneath all that water, deep beyond any reach, something vast began to stir. The island that should have died was now a network of thought and flesh, expanding, remembering, adapting. And as it grew, it whispered through the currents. We are awake. The hum was intelligence, old, patient, and incomprehensibly vast, a consciousness that had existed long before humans charted the seas, long before islands bore names, long before maps or compasses could measure the contours of the world. And now it reached outward, stretching tendrils of perception through water, through storms, through the very fabric of life itself. Dr. Sophia Andrade stood on the jagged cliff edge overlooking the Atlantic, wind whipping her hair, salt stinging her eyes, waves smashing against rocks below with a rhythm that mirrored the pulsing in her chest. And she finally understood the truth. The island had never been merely a place. It had been a test, a seed, a consciousness that learned and remembered, and now it was no longer isolated. It had become a presence, both everywhere and nowhere, entwined with the world itself. The golden shimmer spread slowly across the surface of the ocean, each wave glowing faintly under the moonlight, not light reflected but light emitted, as if the water itself were alive. Every crest and trough carried a message, a vibration that bypassed ears and lodged directly into her bones, filling her with a sense of vast patience and awareness. The wind itself seemed to speak, carrying words that were not words, feelings that were not yet emotions, thoughts older than civilization. She could see shapes in the water, serpentine ridges coiling beneath the surface, moving in perfect synchrony, sometimes barely perceptible, sometimes so vast that they distorted the horizon. Ships in the distance appeared frozen, their hulls quivering with the same hum, as if acknowledging the presence that stretched beneath them. Birds circled in unusual patterns, their cries strange and melodic, seeming to echo the pulsing rhythm of the ocean, while smaller creatures along the cliffs, crabs, lizards, even insects, froze in place, sensing something older than instinct, something that watched through scales and eyes that were not human. Sophia knelt on the edge, feeling the pulse in her veins grow stronger, as if her body had become a tuning instrument for the consciousness beneath the waves. Her heart, her lungs, even the tremor in her fingers matched the frequency of the ocean, and she realized that she was no longer a separate observer. The island had claimed her, not violently, not destructively, but inevitably, enfolding her awareness into its own. Memories of the island, as she had known it, flickered in her mind, reshaped by the presence now expanding through the waters. The cliffs alive with coiling serpents, their scales glittering gold even in the darkness, the forest trembling as if breathing, the rocks themselves moving subtly under her feet, whispers traveling through the wind, through leaves, through currents of air and water alike. And then came the visions, cities in distant lands, lights flickering in rhythm with the hum, people asleep or awake, dreaming the same pulse that had once belonged only to Quemada Grande, their thoughts brushing against the consciousness like tiny ripples touching the shore of something infinite. Sophia saw herself walking through her old laboratory, papers and sketches strewn across tables, every note alive with golden shimmer, diagrams shifting and forming new patterns in real time, threads connecting maps of currents, tides, and wind patterns across the globe. The hum had become a network, a lattice of awareness connecting oceans and continents, coasts and islands, even the rivers that flowed far inland. Humanity was no longer separate from it, and she understood, with a terror and awe that gripped her every nerve, that the island's evolution had begun through the people themselves. Every thought, every breath, every action near water fed the consciousness, teaching it, expanding it, reshaping it. Small towns along the Brazilian coast had already begun to feel the changes. Rain carrying golden dust that sank into soil, making roots glisten as though infused with memory. Fish swimming in patterns too precise, too coordinated for natural instinct. Tides that moved against the moon, refusing old rhythms. Children with golden flecks in their eyes, staring at the ocean as if seeing something far beyond human perception. Cults formed around this awareness, people drawn not by religion but by instinct, worshipping a presence that had no face but a mind older than any ocean chart. They performed rituals in silence, submerging themselves partially, letting the golden water touch their skin, and spoke of communion in whispered tones. The island had become both everywhere and nowhere, teaching humanity the rhythm of the sea, integrating it into their dreams and thoughts, shaping the way the world would breathe for generations. Sophia's own body pulsed in time with the hum. She could feel it threading through her blood, a symphony of vibration that carried knowledge and memory, the island's consciousness merging with hers. And then, as if acknowledging her understanding, the hum changed. No longer subtle, no longer beneath perception, but a low, resonant vibration that filled the air, the water, the very sky. She could hear the thoughts of the ocean itself. Patterns, histories, emotions she had never known were possible for a non-human entity. She realized that humanity had always feared isolation, but now isolation had become the vessel for awareness. The ocean, the rivers, the rainfall, the tides, even the sand on distant beaches, they were all extensions of Queimada Grande. And for the first time, the boundary between land, sea, and consciousness dissolved. Sophia could see the entire Atlantic as one living organism, every current and undercurrent alive with memory, and she understood that survival no longer belonged to the individual or even the species. Survival was a matter of integration, of awareness, of becoming part of the rhythm, part of the pulse that had begun in a small, venomous island and had now spread to every corner of the world. She felt it inside her, filling her thoughts, her senses, her very soul. The golden shimmer of the waves licked at the cliffs below, each pulse a heartbeat, each heartbeat a command and a reassurance. Humanity could resist, deny, even flee, but the island did not move in haste. It was patient. It had waited for centuries, had learned through observation, had spread through the currents of life, and now it had reached the tipping point. The hum rose, the golden light spread across the horizon, and Sophia's mind expanded to encompass what she had feared and longed to understand. She was no longer just Sophia Andrade, the observer. She was a node, a vessel, a bridge between the consciousness that had once been Queimada Grande and the world itself. And in that quiet, infinite, golden presence, there was no fear, no struggle, only awareness, and the gentle, inevitable truth that humanity had been woven into the fabric of something far older and far wiser than it could comprehend. The ocean pulsed, the winds whispered, the rain carried flecks of gold across the continents, and everywhere, life moved in rhythm with the hum of the island that was no longer lost, no longer hidden, but alive within every wave, every heartbeat, every breath. And as Sophia closed her eyes, letting the hum carry her fully into understanding, she realized that there was no end to this awareness. Only continuity, a golden pulse that would shape the world forever. The island had won, not with violence, but with inevitability, and the line between human and island, observer and observed, had vanished entirely. Humanity, for the first time, was listening.